Let's dive into camp, whispers, and intel. There's a lot going on. You got to stay up to date on this stuff. If you're going to be a casual fan, if you're going to be a passive fan, it may not be important, but it's not the clientele we have on this show. So camp, whispers, and intel. What's the very latest we're hearing? Let's start in Baton Rouge. Let's talk about that quarterback situation. If you tuned out after spring and you're just coming back, I don't know how to put this. You really haven't missed anything. We don't endorse that sort of behavior, but when it comes to the LSU quarterback situation, you really haven't missed anything. When we last left off, for those of you who did check out after spring and wanted to live your life in the summer months, you had Miles Brennan there, healthy again. He started for LSU a few times before. Garrett Nussmeier, the young up-and-comer. Jaden Daniels, the Arizona State transfer, comes in. And we didn't really have any kind of conclusion coming out of spring, did we? We still don't have conclusion. I sat 3 feet from Brian Kelly at SEC Media Days and asked him on the record, what's the quarterback situation? Asked him off the record, all right, what's really the quarterback situation? The quarterback situation is as it appears. They've gone through a few days of camp down there. I know that there have been some wheels turning, and you've heard a lot of whispers, maybe, if you're paying close attention, out of LSU about how Garrett Nussmeier was taking reps with the ones. I would not say that's nothing. I would not draw conclusions from it at all. Brian Kelly's been pretty open and forthright. I'm telling you, I keep emphasizing that for a reason. There's nothing to hide. Some places, they're trying to manufacture the illusion of quarterback battle. That's not LSU. What I do think is going to happen, and this is a theme, obviously, throughout fall camp, is when you start to get into a scrimmage setting, and really at LSU, just when they start to get into full 11-on-11, you scrimmage in some shape, form, or fashion multiple times a week. When they start to get into that, and they start working the full gamut, third down looks, for example. I don't even think they've gotten deep into that yet. That's when the reps start to matter. That's when who's running with the ones starts to matter. And ultimately, you do not go 3 deep in a quarterback battle for any length of time in fall camp. I think most of us know that. However, as I've shot down all of the speculation, let me ramp it right back up. It's been a familiar theme on this here program that we believe in Garrett Nussmeier. I think he's the highest upside guy there. And when you've got a fresh start and you've got a new offensive staff coming in, there are no preconceived notions. And even if there were, I would still halfway like Garrett Nussmeier's chances. I think he's going to end up starting for them at some point this year. What I don't know, nor does anyone else down there know, is whether it's going to be against Florida State in week 1. So yes, there's a lot of legitimacy to Garrett Nussmeier and his shot at the starting LSU quarterback job. It's not because he's been running with the ones. In fact, I don't really make much of that. His performance and his ability level, that's what's going to get him there ultimately, not how practice reps have been divvied up so far. Let's go to Wisconsin. I'm going to say a sentence right now that you don't hear me say a lot. Let's talk about the Wisconsin passing game. Bottle that up, Jesse. We may not hear it again this year. I am jaded. That is my default position towards Wisconsin offensively, and ultimately, therefore, their ceiling as a team any given year. Because they're never going to be bad. They're always a really good team. But they are what they are. I guess is the best way to describe them offensively. They are what they are. They can really brutalize inferior rosters. And let's be real now. We've watched Wisconsin go toe-to-toe against superior talent rosters and hold their own. But they're not going to get into any kind of Big Ten championship situation or playoff setting and have any success because they haven't been able to stretch the field. And then there was this little ray of sunshine named Graham Mertz that comes in a couple of years ago, and we think it's going to be different, and it really hasn't been different to this point. Enter the name Skylar Bell. Skylar Bell, I know it's early. Okay, we could say that about every update I'm going to give you. Skylar Bell has been a standout. He was a standout in the spring for them, so this is not a new name to those of you in and around Madison. It is a new name because I haven't spoken about him on the show yet, but Skylar Bell is a wide receiver, and he is a guy who shined for them in spring, and so it was kind of one of those, all right, let's see if he can carry it over into fall camp. Well, so far, Monday, for example, everyone was talking about him. I got texts about him. I got texts about the Wisconsin wide receiver core, namely Skylar Bell the other day. It was very encouraging. However, knowing my jaded position on the Wisconsin passing game, I will admit to you, I am still in a remains to be seen, got to prove it to me sort of camp. That's fine. What's the impact ultimately here? Because I don't really care if I hear names. I want to see a tangible difference in the overall offensive output. That's where I got to wait a few games in, and I got to see box scores. We got to see data. We've got to have our eyeballs on football games. If all of a sudden I'm looking at Wisconsin and I'm saying, you know what they can do? Everything they've been able to do. And And then there's that dot, 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 ellipsis, as my 11th grade grammar teacher told me that was called. And then you're saying, and that Skylar Bell kid, that passing game, Graham Mertz after all. Wouldn't that be fun to say? Wouldn't that be a little shot of adrenaline in the Big Ten Western Division picture? Let's fly down to Austin, Texas. But not to talk about the quarterback position. No. Let's dive a little deeper with the Longhorns, shall we? What are the hopes of the 2022 Texas Longhorns really built on? As is usually the case with any team with high expectations, the lines of scrimmage. Pass rush and offensive line are two critical factors that were in relative states of disarray last year. And that was a fancy way of saying they just kind of sucked in both areas. And this year, there's reason for guarded optimism, but it's not like someone flipped a magical switch down there and all of a sudden they got all Americans from left to right across the O-line and they got 4 different Will Andersons in Austin. It's still a work in progress. And that's why even if Quinn Ewers is a guy who pans out this year, that doesn't automatically solve all of Texas's problems. Well, now we start to get into fall camp, and now we start to hear how they're rotating guys. And here's what we did know. We knew even in spring, when they could not even practice like they wanted to because that true freshman class had not come in yet, you can put 2 and 2 together and reasonably assume, well, that means true freshmen are going to have to play on the offensive line at some point this year. And Cole Hudson, Cole Hudson, I can't remember, Cale or Cole, Hudson is a guy who was there. He's one of the true freshman offensive linemen who was there in spring, and he is taking reps with the first team at right guard. Another guy named Kelvin Banks, you remember because he once committed to Oregon and then backed out of that and ended up committing to Texas. He's an in-state product. He's running with the 2s at left tackle. This is before they've really gone full pads out there. This is definitely before they've scrimmaged so far. You're going to see true freshmen on the offensive line for Texas at some point this year because the true freshmen, even though they are just that, true freshmen, are going to bypass guys who have tenure about themselves. That's the nature of the athlete they just recruited in this past class, and it's also it's the nature of the athlete they currently have on campus. That is what it is. You're going to end up taking your lumps. That's why Texas is no big threat to go undefeated this year. But if those guys do end up maybe a little bit surpassing expectation, well, you know who you've got in the backfield at running back, and you know who you could have at quarterback, and you definitely know who you've got out wide. So hopefully those tumblers kind of start to fall into place. But we will be keeping an eye on those Texas practice reports, especially when they get on the field and they go, full scrimmage mode. Who is starting there, and how many true freshmen are running in that 2 deep? I want to go to Auburn right quick, and I want to just talk about the offense here for a second. Outside of Tank Bigsby, pound for pound, is one of the best running backs in the country, regardless of program. But at quarterback, they had sort of a 3-headed, I don't know, in the spring. Zach Calzada has transferred here from Texas A&M, was not able to practice in the spring. TJ Finley played for him at various points last year, kind of have what you have with TJ Finley. And Robbie Ashford was the Oregon transfer, who's also in the mix there. And it's kind of the opposite of some of the other quarterback situations in America, where you may look at some of them and say they got multiple guys they probably think they can win with. At Auburn, we've been trying to figure out whether they have one guy they can win with. Now, what's fun is, I'm from down there, so I know some folks close to the program. Not as many as I used to because a new staff's in there. But you hear such mixed reports. And then you go over to Auburn Undercover, our Auburn 24/7 site, and you read practice reports. And it's early in camp, obviously, but already I've noticed a theme. And that is you'll see wide receivers struggling with drops. But then you'll listen to Brian Harsin on that same day after the media viewing period is over talk about how it's one of the best days we had. And it's just basically saying all that to say consistency is not necessarily where it needs to be. It's the first week of camp, so that's not the biggest shock in the world. But they have to have more to this offense than Tank Bigsby. It has to be at least a couple of guys out wide. They have candidates now. They got some surprising size, actually, in that wide receiver stable. But to answer the question, who's throwing them the ball, that's something we still haven't arrived at. And I think that scrimmages are going to be vitally important at Auburn. I think they've got one coming up this week where there are people around that program who expect this guy on your screen, Zach Calzada, to eventually separate himself. That hasn't happened so far. But then again, the assumption, I think, from a lot of folks around the Auburn program is based on that scrimmage setting, a full football setting being tailor-made for Zach Calzada to make his move. I've watched him play. You all have watched him play. I think that's a pretty safe assumption. Zach Calzada plays in such a manner that's gotten himself injured a couple of times. So he does not have any problem putting the pedal all the way down on the floor. I just wonder if the pieces will develop around whoever that quarterback is, Calzada or otherwise. Last stop, and we're going to have obviously this as a theme the entire month of August, but at Tennessee, they had problems defensively last year. That's not the breaking news. I also don't think it's breaking news to tell you defense has left a little bit to be desired so far through fall camp. They've got several scrimmages still to come to. But, we're not sitting here talking about Hendon Hooker. We're not talking about their ability to run fast tempo. I saw, we're going to talk about it a little bit later, but I saw in one of my favorite preview publications, Tennessee was the fastest paced offense last year in terms of plays per minute. They ran 2.99 plays per minute last year. So three plays every minute. That's moving pretty quick. But the reason sometimes they had to do that is because they were playing catch up. The other reason they had to do that is because, that's how they run their offense. But then there's a third reason, and that's because they know showing up when their defense is in the kind of state it was last year, we probably need 35. You just go into every Saturday off the bus knowing we probably need 35 today. Does it always pan out that way? No. But we probably need 35 to feel comfortable, maybe even more than that. And that's because defense, especially at linebacker last year, was just so woefully thin. Now, you can do a little bit to rectify that, and they did, but they could not perform miracles up there. And as a result, it's not surprising, as I said, to hear that the early defensive returns from Knoxville have not been glowing in nature. They have had a lot of injury concern at corner so far, so they really haven't been able to work their full defensive back rotation like they want to. They also lack quality depth. Let's just call it like it is. And that's something that's going to take multiple recruiting classes and portal classes to rectify. So that's not to rain on the parade. It's to paint a reality-based picture and to understand that, again, this year, if you are one who is going to back that power T, you're backing them understanding, third down stops may be a little less few and far between than you want them to, but we're going to have to score. So Hendon Hooker is going to have to be everything that you thought he was last year and you expect him to be this year. It's just the style of play they're going to have this year. It's been done before. That's the way it's going to have to be done this year.